Hello everybody and welcome to Retro Ratchet. So today we have the original Ford XR3. Now this is where the story began for Ford in the early 80s when it produced a string of the best-selling and most popular XR branded models that stormed the UK. Now what makes this one rare? Well, this is a 1981 model, which means it's a 4-speed manual. And these were only produced between October 1980 and March 1982, making this one super rare. So if you want to find out what it's like, then stay tuned. So hot hatches were all about sports car performance in a practical family car. Now I guess things don't get more practical than a Mark III Escort. They sold thousands and thousands of these things, but there was one negative: you couldn't leave these anywhere without them being nicked. So for hot hatches to be successful in the 1980s, they not only needed to be fast, but they had to look fast. And Ford 100% smashed it with the XR3 in my opinion. So every hot hatch in the 80s has to have cool wheels, and the XR3 is no exception. So these ones here, 14-inch telly dials, they suit it down to a T in my opinion. Quite unusual, but again, very distinctive. So moving around the front, we have this chin spoiler here. It is quite discreet, it's only about an inch deep. Bumper overriders, and of course every XR3 or RS Turbo or RS 1600 for that matter had to have the spotlights to make it stand out. So the view around the back is no disappointment either. You've got this rubber black boot spoiler here, bumper overriders, Escort Xr3 written in black text there. The only thing you don't have is a big massive sports exhaust, but that was pretty typical of the era. And finally you have these little arch spats here in this one. Don't know if that's standard or not, but they do look pretty nice. Interior is an important part in any hot hatch in the 80s. Well, any car in general really, but more so in a hot hatch. Early XR3s came with this laser seat trim, sports seats with these bigger bolsters here. They're also fitted with these headrest pads and a 2-spoke sports steering wheel. It's actually quite small for a standard car, so it's actually quite pleasant to drive with. Dashboard, so I'd describe the dashboard probably as very functional. It isn't overpopulated with warning lights and dials. You've got your rev counter there, obviously your speedometer there. A couple little details: the rev counter is actually tilted a little bit, as is the speedometer, which is a nice little extra there. And 0 is away around there. Again, that's pretty unusual to have it so far over that way. And you've got a few little warning gauges there that you don't see on the lower trim models. Heater controls up here, fan down there. You've got your fog light switches there. This one's fitted with an aftermarket CD player and storage for 4 cassettes. And it was 4 in the XR4 that I just reviewed as well. So they must have deemed that that was the number that you had to be able to take with you. You've got another few switches around here. You've got heated rear window, rear wiper and instrument dimmer. And there's another look at that steering wheel. Yeah, I quite like that. And moving up here, you have that little LCD clock that you see on Mark IV Escorts as well. And we have a manual sunroof up there. And you might not be able to make out, but the perforated roof lining that is typical of so many Fords of this era. Well, these are fitted with the, what was very advanced at the time, 1.6 CVH. So cast iron block, alloy cylinder head, overhead cam with hydraulic tappets, which again was quite advanced for the early 80s. The XR3s were fitted with a high lift cam, Weber carburetor, and unfortunately they only produced about 96 brake horsepower, a good bit behind the Golf GTI, which was 110, so it did let the side down a wee bit in that respect. So in the early days, people did struggle getting their heads round the 3-year cam belt change interval on these. I think it was a lot of them floated about with snapped cam belts and as a result wrecked engines. So yeah, that took a little bit of getting used to. Battery trays used to go on these as well. They used to rot out within a number of years. This one does actually look pretty solid, which is good. We've got a wee bit of something going on there with the header tank, and that was not me, might I add. I think we're missing a cam belt cover on this one as well, and I didn't lose that one. And this one, as I mentioned earlier, it was fitted with a 4-speed manual, which was unique to the very early ones. They later fitted these with a 5-speed manual, and then later again they fitted them with Bosch fuel injection. And power output rose a little bit. I can't remember exactly how, but yeah, very easy to work on these, reasonably reliable. They are not the smoothest engines in the world, and they are a little bit harsh. I think earlier on in their life they could have done with a little bit more power. So let's take it out and see if it actually drives like a hot hatch and deserves that XR3 badge. Right, let's get it started. It's got a lot to live up to. So we do know this one does need a new carburetor. Right, so what's my first impressions? Responsive steering and noisy engine. So we have to cut this one a little bit of slack because it is in need of a new carburetor, which has been ordered and delivered. So performance isn't going to be 100% in it. I think there's an issue with the idle circuit in that car. So when you take your foot off the gas, it stalls, which makes it challenging on a junction like that when somebody cuts your nose off. Thanks very much for that. Okay, so let's talk about performance. So I was actually very surprised when I first jumped into this. I did previously own a 1.6 gear. That was in 1989, I was on a Mark IV. And this is a lot more responsive, and acceleration is definitely quicker in this than the one that I had. So I was very surprised about that. So either the one I had was down on power, or the lower gearing and the 6 extra horsepower in this makes a massive difference. So you get to 60 mile an hour, and it is wanting that extra gear. You're sitting just over 3,000 revs, and you keep on reaching down to try and put it in at fifth, but obviously there isn't one. So, and the problem with the CVH engine is as well, it's not the most refined and quiet engine when you rev it and extend it. So yeah, you do have to put up with quite a lot of engine noise when you are doing 60, 70 mile an hour, unfortunately. Right, what's mid-range acceleration like? 40 mile an hour, drop into third, floor it, 50, 55, 60. Yeah, so I actually think that picks up pretty well for only 96 brake. Obviously not the fastest thing in the world, but a lot faster than that 1.6 gear that I had. Right, we'll give it a wee push in second gear then, see how it goes. Picks up really well, yeah. I'd put my money on the fact it's a short gear and it's giving you the perception that it's a lot quicker than it is. But yeah, it's very responsive, picks its heels up and it gets going. Right, we've got a clear bit of road in front of us. We'll see what a 0 to 60 is like. So I certainly wouldn't say it was a fast car or it was rapid, but it's exactly what I would expect for a hot hatch of the early 80s to be able to perform as. So one thing you do notice is if you extend that CVH over 4,500 revs, it does get a little bit painful and you are a little bit discouraged from doing it. So for me, it's between 3 and 4,500 where all the fun's to be had with this thing. But I think steering is perfectly weighted. Once you're rolling for these type of roads, you get good feedback through the steering wheel, but just manoeuvring is a little bit more tricky because of how it weights up. Again, we can't really test the full extent of its handling today, but it does seem to be like a little go-kart on these B-class roads. Definitely a lot of fun. Brakes are pretty decent in this one. There's very little pedal travel, so it does bite right at the top, which is pretty reassuring. There's obviously no ABS on these models, no power assisted steering, and definitely no safety aids such as airbags if everything goes wrong. So you do have to be pretty careful in something like this. But it's a very enjoyable little retro car to blast about in these lanes with. So the gearbox, that's one area where I'm not really that impressed with. It's quite difficult getting some gears, especially first and reverse. It must be a bit of a common theme today with Fords and first and reverse, having difficulty getting them selected. Yeah, it's a wee bit notchy. Synchros aren't really that good. But yeah, so I would say that's probably one of the negatives of these. I'm not sure if that's just this one or Ford Xr3s in general. Now we're going to do a 3-point turn, so thank you to the person who tuned the car, but while I make a fool of myself here in the middle of the road, trying to keep it running and selecting first while the car is rolling and not being very successful at that. Oh, we've got reversal. It did actually feel like first. Can I get first? Well, this is pleasant. Gearbox gets 0 out of 10 from me, as does the state of tune of the carburetor. What did I like about it? The styling. I think the styling is 100% spot on for these. It's the right colour, you've got the right wheels, and you've got the right amount of add-ons, just enough to differentiate it from a standard model. Performance, yeah, it was weird because 96 horsepower, it seemed a lot more, but it is just that perception of exhilaration due to the short gearing. But it sounded nice when you revved it. Well, the exhaust note sounded nice. The engine was a little bit harsh, I guess, is well documented on these. But, you know, revving it to 4.5, that type of thing was actually pretty good fun. The gearbox I didn't like. However, I was struggling with first, struggling with reverse. It just wasn't a pleasant gearbox to drive at all. So I don't know if that's this one or if that's them all in general. Handling, yeah, I mean, it was like a go-kart. I obviously never stretched it too much, but it gripped the road well. It wasn't too stiff, it wasn't too wallowy, and it was a lot of fun. Brakes were effective enough, as you would expect from something of this age. And the steering, yeah, I mean, it weighted up when you were obviously down below 30 mph, which you expect, but not too heavy and not unmanageable. But a lot of feedback, you know, when you're above 30 mph on these country roads, which is what you want. So, yeah, so overall, a big thumbs up for the XR3 from me. So what would be interesting is try an XR3i now, and then maybe a Mark IV XR3i or an RS Turbo, something like that, if anybody would like to loan me one of those to do a review. So thanks again, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next one.